Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ultimatum Queer Love Wrap Up. I'm Asia, and surprise, we're back for some postseason coverage. We're so excited to be here interviewing Tiff from this season of the Ultimatum Queer Love. And of course, I am joined with my amazing co hosts for this season of the Ultimatum Queer Love, Evie and Mary. How are y'all doing?
I can't believe we have Tiff here. This is so exciting and fun.
It's me.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. I feel like I told all my friends that you were coming, and people are hyped. So
It's up for it. Yes, I
this
love it. I love it.
this was a get. This was a get. So
Yeah.
I'm hyped.
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
excited to get in the conversation. I feel like we've rolled right from Love is Blind to Ultimatum to now some post-show coverage. So it's just that, the ball never stops over here on RHAP. It's great.
Not at all.
Not at
And
all.
before we get started, make sure y'all go subscribe to our Love at First Sight feed. That's where you can get all of our coverage of this season of the Ultimatum Queer Love, as well as the last season of the Ultimatum, Married at First Sight, Love is Blind, the show Perfect Match. It's our one-stop shop for all the unconventional dating slash marriage shows.
The kinetic content. The
You're
kinetic
right,
content. A lot of
exactly.
kinetic content.
Exactly. So, Tiff, thank you so much for being here. How are
Of course,
you?
my pleasure. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing lovely now that we're talking to you.
Yes.
So yeah, we just want to dive into it. Let's dive into it all. So who is Tiff Durr? That's how you pronounce it, Durr?
It is. It is. Wow. Yeah, sometimes people say dare or dear. Yeah. So me, I mean, gosh, I'm originally from the East Coast, and about 4 years ago I moved over to the West Coast. I am, queer identifying, non-binary, lesbian, just a person who loves documentaries and my dog and my cat, and I don't know, tries to make life a better place. I don't know, just learn along the way
Yeah.
in this journey of life that we have no blueprint for. So
Mm-hmm.
happy
Oh,
to do
yeah.
it though, y'all here.
Right. Are there any qualities about you that you feel like people didn't see on the show that you feel like is a huge part of your personality?
Yeah, so like a couple people did mention it. You see maybe a tiny bit with Sam, but when you focus on the idea of getting married for 8 weeks straight as your full-time job to talk about marriage and marriage and marriage, and on top of that, when the toxic relationship that I was in, that becomes incredibly draining, and you tend, in reality TV, you tend to say the same things over and over and over again. So they can get that little tiny nuance, detail difference so they can stick it in the TV show. But with that being said, I was very drained, and I have way more of like a funny, lighthearted, sarcastic side of me. You saw maybe a little bit of that with Sam, but I would say that takes up like 75% of my whole personality, to be honest. It's like there's so much more layers and elements other than just like love and marriage, but that's the focal point for the show.
Awesome.
Totally. So I have to say, I love that you came out and were like, I'm a non-binary lesbian. Same fucking never like fun to get to talk to another non-binary reality TV lesbian.
Yeah, there's not that many of them.
there-
I think I'm like the second one, I think, in the dating world, other than Kai from Are You
Yes.
the One or something?
Yes. It's a rare, and I think that, I mean, to me, this is like one of the coolest things that the Queer Ultimatum did, was like just have so much more representation of like our community and like
Oh,
lesbian culture, queer culture, just like
yeah.
really on display.
Yeah, I think when they busted open the queer world, like, hey, let's do a mainstream, not a lesbian dating show or a sapphic dating show, a mainstream dating show that happens to have a queer season. I think when they decided to go like a little unhinged with that, they decided to bust the door wide open with like so many more things. And if you even think about it, like not even just non-binary, many different races, and also like different storylines and stuff too. Like with my ex, she was like, I'm pretty sure one of the first mothers on reality TV. That's a different one too. Like I haven't seen it yet on Netflix.
Yeah, dating as a mother, dating as a queer mother. Yeah, definitely not a story that's really out there. Yeah, that's such a good point. And I wanted to also give you the opportunity, if you're interested in sharing your pronouns. That was actually a question I got a lot from
Yeah.
people when we started interviewing. So
Mhm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just yeah. Okay. Well, first answer that question, and then I'll
Thank
ask you
you.
my follow up question.
Of course. So yeah, I go by they them.
Okay, awesome. And like, how did you feel about the show not having pronouns as part of it, or just in general the like gender representation on the show?
I think I, I have mixed reviews on that. I think mainly, if I can sum that up, my personal story about being non-binary is, about it just was a language that I never really knew, right, until recent. There wasn't a word for it. There wasn't this, So I would say if I known about it earlier in my life, I would
Mhm.
have identified as that. However, I would say I started to identify as that 4 or 5 years ago. But in the process of my own personal journey and I guess it's just like unwiring a little bit of shame, right? I didn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable to have
Mm.
to change like, hey, recognize me as non-binary. Yes. And that was a piece of cake for people, like, oh, Tiff's non-binary. But to change the pronouns, right? I didn't want to make them feel too uncomfortable. I just didn't, right? And so I did go by she and they. I was like, okay, well, both is okay. I don't want to make someone uncomfortable if they don't want to. So on during the show, I did go by she they pronouns, but honestly, in my heart, I truly went like in my heart, I went by they. But I
Mhm.
noticed that no one for 4 to 5 years, and I found out very quickly on the show, no one used it. They didn't
Mm.
even know. I mean, on my application that I put in for the show, they did know I was non-binary. My license says non-binary because I'm in the state of California. But production didn't even know until about 3 weeks into the show. So with that
Oh.
being said, everyone tried to unlearn it. And then,
Uh,
so it's not shaming anyone for it, but it's just I think it depicts the reality of what happened.
yeah.
And here's the thing is that, you know, I do go by they, but during the show, there were no other pronouns that were used other than she, her for the rest of the cast. So it kind of is kind of like if Netflix were to update it and include pronouns. Mal also goes by she and they, and now Xander goes by she and they. So it's kind of like that would even be outdated. So it's as fluid as it is, which I'm totally for. It's like I see it from both sides, if I can say it. But I will say Netflix is very, very willing to learn and to understand. It's a big corporation, but at the end of the day, these are people that work for the company. They, long story short, they did post a little thing on Netflix, like like 2 weeks before the show, we went to a press junket and they like already knew my pronouns, already knew everything. Everything was out there and they
Mhm.
fucked it up. They dropped the ball. And I actually, for my non-binary community, because at the end of the day, I know who I am. I don't need anyone's validation. But for my community, my platform that I have now, I felt the need to speak up. As soon as I spoke up about it and talked to a Netflix representative, Grapevine got around, and that video was completely deleted off of all Netflix social medias within 20 minutes. They're like, we dropped the ball.
Wow.
So they are willing to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
kind of goes. It's like I feel half and half about it.
So you had mentioned before recording that you have it's hard to condense down the how you got on the show, what the casting process was like, all
Yeah.
of that. And you've talked about it some other places, but I do wonder, once you were cast on the show, once the show was about to start, did you have any reservations about the format, especially once you figured out that you were the ultimatum receiver? Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure there? What was your perspective going into the show?
You know, I I didn't really think about it as like an ultimatum receiver or giver per se. I honestly looked at it like that was my what I thought at the time, my teammate. And like, hey, we're in this together. We had to be open minded, right? About hey, there might be a chance that we might connect with someone. There might be a chance. We had to be open to that. We weren't banking on that though. The possibility we thought was pretty low. One, I'm pretty picky, as you saw on the show, but then also we never really had to deal with third parties in our relationship. It was more so just the lack of communication. So we thought it was a great opportunity to go on the show because the social experiment actually forces us during the dating period for 2 weeks, and then during the trial marriage, our first trial marriage, for 3 weeks, to not talk to each other. So there's like 5 weeks where maybe we have spoken like 4 or 5 times. So that gave us the space to be able to think about what our needs are and how we can come back better or worse or whatever it is. So I think that was needed because you know how toxic relationships are. You can kind of like, you know, break up, get back together. There's not that space that's in between. So I thought it was a great opportunity for that.
Was that the most space you had for a while, probably?
Yeah, ever. That was the most space. Like a good 4 to 5 weeks, you know, where I, other than maybe a couple occasions on camera and one time because there was an emergency that happened with like Shiloh, my dog. But we like let production know, like where we both showed up at the vet. But other than that, like nothing, you know.
Wow. And on the point, you, as you said, like this thing of when you're on a TV show and the producers are kind of, you're saying these same answers over and over, and you're talking about this topic, you're talking about your relationship, marriage over and over again. Do you feel like that element also like had some impact on your, I don't know, just like you're isolated from your partner and it's just like, you've got nothing to do except answer these questions about it. Do you think that how did that impact?
Had an impact on it. I think, you know, just the show itself, just the way it's formatted. I mean, you're filming up to 16 hours a day. Most days I would say around, you know, 10 to 12. You know, we have anywhere between like 3 scenes a day where the average scene lasts like, you know, 3 hours or so ish. And then we're getting ready and changing in between. So like before a scene, we're talking to our producers, prepping us for the scene. Then we're talking during that scene, right, about issues. Then later on, you know, post that, we're doing what's called on the fly interviews. So we're like talking about how we felt about just what happened. Later on that night, we're in the interview room talking about what happened earlier that day. And then like after that, we might have another scene and another scene, another scene. So we're like, you know, and then the next day, the producers are like, hey, yesterday you talked about this. So moving forward, what do you want to talk about? So that in itself is kind of like creates, even if you're not a self-aware person, you are forced to become more self-aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing, I know you're kind of asking me these questions of like, what influenced this, what influenced this, what influenced, you know, my decisions. What I will say, looking back on it, processing it with therapy and all of that, is that like a lot of people say, hey, why did I actually propose? When people come on shows, you know, this particular show for different reasons. One was, I want to have all my finances ready. Another person is, you know, like different reasons. Our reason was communication, period. And we've never been on a reality show before, especially an intimate reality show full time. When you have producers essentially holding your hand and you're doing what's basically talk therapy and guiding you through the process, it's unscripted, but they're guiding you through the process. And you're talking about these things and you have this level of self-awareness when you're on camera, but you kind of forget, but you kind of don't. And all of that blended together up until decision day. You actually, like, I actually started to truly believe that her and I were actually really working on our communication and getting somewhere. Of course, you only see 1% of what happens. And like those 2 scenes that you saw maybe where like it was kind of like bickering of us back and forth. Those were our worst 2 ones that we had. The rest of the times we actually were communicating really well and we were being self-aware and we were validating each other's feelings and everything. But what happened is that as soon as the cameras went down and then we got engaged and then went back home, within 1 week, it started becoming bad all over again. And that's just the sad reality of it. Like we didn't have anyone kind of like holding our hand through the process anymore. We were just alone out in the wild again, you know?
Yeah.
You bring up a good point about the different reasons why people go on the show based on, you know, their with them and their significant other. Since your main conflict was over communication style, do you feel like you were given enough opportunity on the show to work through that, or should there have been any other maybe like elements to the show of, hey, we're going to have you two in, you know, videoed like therapy with each other, specifically working on communication? It kind of seems like it was a little left more up to yourself of living this like, you know, trial marriage, trial home life, as opposed to like, let's work on the root of the issue here.
Yeah. So what you saw on the show was a lot of like, you know, we did some journaling activities and XYZ on the show to talk about it because that's the drama part of it, right? For whatever reason, the element of putting therapy on this show wasn't a thing. However, I will say that Kinetic Content, whatever's Kinetic Content or the Netflix budget, I don't know. They actually did pay for individual and couples therapy during the show. So Mildred and I did go to couples therapy the entire show. So we
Oh,
had about
wow.
eight couples therapy sessions, and I had 8 individual individual therapy sessions during the time. So that it's not shown, but I mean,
Yeah.
all of us had the opportunity completely free to do it.
Wow, that's honestly amazing. I wonder, like, I get them not showing that on the show because it's personal and private, but the knowledge that that's happening honestly makes me feel really different about the show, or just
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's
same.
like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
way more emotionally intelligent than and I don't know if that's the word, but like than what is perceived. They have to push up the
Yeah.
drama. But I will say it was a very like emotionally driven, life-changing experience. And it seemed more, I don't know, like adulting, even though it was an unhinged concept, we all
Yeah.
came into it very aware of like
Mhm.
what's going on and trying to respect the process as much as possible. And of course, we're going to get into feelings because, hello, it's like, 10 AFABs dating each other. Like it's, of course, it's going to happen. But we had it for the most part with a little bit of dignity. And it just came out way more unhinged. And we actually filmed it back to back with season 1. So
Mhm.
we never saw an ultimatum one. It wasn't even called the ultimatum. It was called San Diego Couples Queer Project. So, that was filmed
Wow.
September to November 2021. Fast forward to April 2022. My then fiance and I sat down to watch season 1. Because when you have this like a project that you've never seen before, like when you apply to Love is Blind, you've seen season 1, season 2, like
Mhm.
you didn't know what to expect. Imagine doing something like that. You're like, have no
Wow.
idea what the finished product with a little bow on it's going to look like. And we sat down thinking like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be cool. Because it was a very emotional experience for us, like not just unhinged drama. So, and it was
Wow.
marketed like that too. So when we sat down and we watched the first episode, we looked at each other and we were like, what the fuck did we sign up for? Like, what the fuck is like, there's no turning back. We could just like jump off a cliff and the shit was still there. Like, it was just like, fuck, we have like, it's going to be bad. So here we
Well,
are.
that-
We're the guinea pigs.
Well, that's
Wow.
awesome to know because I know that with the format of the show, we kind of see it with Love is Blind. It's like as the seasons go along, people feel a little less authentic because now you're kind of having to weed out who really is here for the show, who's really here to get married, who's here maybe because they know Love is Blind is a big show. And I will say, after covering both seasons of the Ultimatum, I thoroughly enjoyed this season a lot more than the first season. So
Mhm.
I'm
A lot of
glad
people
that
say that.
I don't know, it was just everything felt so real. And I
Yeah,
think that
It was very real.
yeah, exactly.
It was real, all right.
Yeah. So that's good that, it came
I
off
think
that
some
way
of
and it
it,
was that way.
based on just my own set. I mean, I've kept in touch with Ray from season 1. So, I will say the big difference is obviously you have straight and queer, which does bring up a stereotype of like, do assigned female at birth people tend to have more deeper conversations and aren't as afraid to express themselves and be vulnerable and be real, or that plus the age gap difference. I would say maybe the median age was like 30, 31 on our show, maybe. And then
I
for
know I
like,
did the calculation at one point. I can look up what
you
it was.
did? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
because
And then
I noticed it was definitely older than the first season for
yeah,
sure.
I mean, you did have a 24-year-old Lexi, but then you had a
Yes.
42-year-old Aussie.
Mhm.
But
Right.
most of us, I was like in the middle with age. Most of us were riding like the early 30s.
And I think there is a thing, there's obviously the stereotype of, yeah, just like lesbians like crying and you hauling or whatever. But I think there's just also a deeper thing of like queer people, there's at some moment in your journey as a queer person, you've had some big self-discovery stuff to go through and to think about and to talk about and like deal with. And there's like something that I do think that process like is a thing that in some ways can make like, forces you to think a little deeper about yourself maybe, or like you have to, at least in those moments, do that. And I think
Yeah.
it makes total sense to me that you put a bunch of queer people together. There's a lot of space for like processing and emotional thinking and who am I and what are we doing here? Like, I think like those things are, I don't know, more accessible maybe
Yeah.
sometimes.
And that
Yeah.
was definitely maybe who knows, there's feedback from the show from season 1, season 2. I'm sure there's a lot of feedback. But Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us too were on the verge of marriage as opposed to season one. Like, I think there's this different element of like getting married very early on, and then you have the whole gender role things and what's normal in society, like, get out of the military, like marry the man, like, stay home and do the cooking kind of thing. And it's just maybe that's just like the flow and process of life, as opposed to it being like very genuine. It's a very conscious choice when you are queer and you want to get married. It's a very conscious choice for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will.
sorry, I was gonna say I looked it up. It was 25 .6 was the average age in season 1, and 31.9 was the average age in your season at
Oh,
the
I
time of
was
filming. So you're close.
32. So yeah, I guess I was on
Yeah.
the upper
And
end.
The average.
and actually the couples in season 2 were also together for almost a year longer on average than it was closer to 3 years than it was to 2 years.
Wow. Where'd you get
So
these calculations? Did you do them? Did you whip them
yeah,
up real
I
quick?
did some math a while ago.
So we did get to see, some fun moments with you during your trial marriage with
Mhm.
Sam. And so I have a personal question because as you can see, I have my lovely dogs
Oh.
behind me. They're my world. This is Pepper. This is Cinnamon.
Hi,
And
Pepper and Cinnamon. Nice to meet
yeah, they're napping on the floor right now.
you.
But I have to ask, was the situation with Shiloh as big of a deal as it was edited, or was there more to the story that we didn't really get to see?
Oh yeah, there was so much more to the story. But to be honest, when you say like, was it, a big of a deal the way it's edited? Honestly, the way like when we watched the reunion, or sorry, at the reunion the day before the reunion, we watched our show, like 5 months before it aired. When I viewed it, I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, I guess because of the context,
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like there was a moments where I'm yelling and stuff like that, but like I'm not calling her. I will take accountability for this, I will say, but just I'll get there. Hold on. But like, to add, the fact that I didn't call her any names. I didn't this. I didn't that. I just like yelled and asked her to love my dog.
Mhm.
So like that, just think of it like that. But there was, so I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. I actually, looking because of the situation that Sam and I are fine 2 years later, still fine. And we're talking like twice a week. And, that we were over that thing in 2 hours. We had a deep, long talk about it. And
Mhm.
we got through it and we were fine. We haven't had a dispute ever since in life together. So I think like that's like, it's like, oh, you live and you learn, you kind of thing, and you move right on. And I honestly thought it was going to be funny. And to watch the public go like that, I was like, I was not expecting that at all. So like, I mean, the next thing I know, I have like death threats of like yelling. And I think a lot of it too is because of like the gentleness of Sam. I think if it was someone else, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
Mhm.
But the context, right? When you're in a very toxic relationship, into where I believe that it was a more of a power control dynamics going on, in at least my experience. I was more so fighting to be heard, and it was like more one dominating the power. I had to have grown. I became to be defensive and have very thick skin. I had to show up like that to essentially emotionally and spiritually survive in the relationship at that point. And when you date someone for 3 years and your heart's delivered to the wrong address, you kind of become a byproduct of that. So it's kind of like your romantic partner does bring out a certain side of you. So like always choose wisely. Had to learn the hard way. But it's kind of like working for 100 hours, right? 100 hours a week for 2 years, and you're on overdrive. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, take a vacation. It's like you don't know how to slow down. You don't know how to, in like the littlest thing, it's kind of like you jump. It's like a knee-jerk reaction reflex. So although I wasn't really romantically into Sam, there is this layer of like, this is the motions that we're doing. We're going to go through the motions. This is your trial wife. This is this. And it's kind of like the immersive experience of like, this is my partner at the time, even though, I don't feel any romance. But, when you come from that environment and all of a sudden there's someone who's disagreeing about someone that you love, and also context She had to go to the emergency room for the vet. She got a UTI during the sequestry phase where we didn't have any electronics and this, that, and that. So she wasn't well. So the filming, then I take that even more personally because I want to make sure my dog's comfortable. My dog's also a senior dog. During the show, my dog and I had to move like into hotels, into holding rooms, into apartments, into new apartments. And I think I counted like 13 or 14 times. So she was stressed out. So when you take, and on top of that, she was my emotional support animal, the only thing keeping me sane. And so when you blend all of that together, that kind of shows more of the context of, where I was coming from. However, at the end of the day, it doesn't give you an excuse to blame your past and your past experiences and your past relationships, an excuse to project that onto someone else. Because I realized I wasn't fighting about the dog. I felt like in that moment, I was fighting with Mildred, and so that's where I take accountability in. And Sam knew that. Sam understood that. And she's like, hey, I'm not Mildred. Hello, over here. And then it's like when I realized that, right? We settled down, and then just like my walls went down because what you saw, the whole dog scene, and then there was the next scene that you see us together. We're in this like restaurant talking about it. There was literally 2 hours in between those two scenes. So it was a very quick back-to-back scene because we had to go out to dinner to that night. And like, imagine us being in a fight and being like, hey, you guys are scheduled for dinner at 7. And we're like, stop. Like, oh my God. Like,
I don't have an appetite.
God. And so as we're getting ready, we weren't talking to each other. And I remember the moment that my walls went down with Sam, I was getting ready. She was in the closet. And then she was like, Tiff, you have every right to feel how you feel. However, that doesn't change what I feel about you and what I see in you. And it was just like, I never received an energy like that. Like, at least as far as I could remember. Right. So it's like, oh, wow. Like, this isn't an enemy. This isn't someone I'm trying to prove my worth to. This isn't someone that I'm trying to constantly, defend myself or constantly prove myself to someone, which I did in my previous relationship. I was like, I could just be me and be myself.
Wow.
So you say that you weren't necessarily, romantically attracted to Sam. Was there anyone else that you had thought either before, maybe even after watching the show, oh, it would have been interesting to get to know them better?
Well, during the show, I went on a lot of dates with Yoli. Like, we were kind of down to like the bottom 2. So I was on a lot of dates with Yoli. We dated them for like both 20 hours or so before we picked our partners. And I didn't quite know, but I wasn't romantically into Yoli either. But kind of like outside the show, no, I mean, I kind of got close to Vanessa, but like in a friendship way. I'm like a light switch. I'm either on or I'm off. And it's like, things don't grow on me. I kind of know right away. But yeah, like, no, I wouldn't say like in any romantic sense, in a friendship sense. Yeah.
I have to say, just in general, the friendship between you and Sam was one of my favorite pieces of the show. I was just like shipping that friendship really hard. It was.
I
really
love
sweet.
it. Yeah, we didn't get that much airtime, I think, compared because it wasn't like juiciness or we weren't hooking up or like, like all of that stuff. But it did play an imperative role kind of in the whole storyline between the Sam Aussie Mildred Tiff swap because it showed us both being combative with each other. Mildred and I, and then when we go our separate ways, because communication was our problem, when we go our separate ways, I am able to receive gentle energy. And then Mildred, it showed contrast of like whatever the dynamic between Mildred and Aussie, to the point where Aussie had to leave. I guess the storyline shows that there's like a common denominator between both. I don't know. So it just showed like I was off in La La Land, like, oh, everything's great, and then like them, it's like a whole tumultuous, relationship. So.
Oh,
Gotcha. Yeah. So with watching the show back, especially with all the time that passed, how was your experience watching the show? Was there anything that you were surprised they included or surprised that they didn't include that you feel like was such a huge part of your story?
Yeah, as far as part of my story, not so much. I mean, it kind of did capture about 90% of kind of what we were going for, kind of what was, except for little details here and there.
Were there any more lighthearted moments on the show that regarding you, that you felt like they didn't show or that you would want to tell people about?
Gosh, you know what? As much as I would love to say there was one, it's such a long time ago, I can't really remember. And then two, again, I was like so drained and like talking about marriage all the time and like serious stuff. That was such a serious and emotionally serious show. There's a few moments, like a few laughing moments during the show that you guys see. But like other than that, like we were all just drained, like drained, talking about love and feelings and falling in love with other people and everything. That just gets so exhausting.
When you would get together for the few times where they would have big groups of all of you together to go out to eat or something, was there any part of that where you're like, oh, okay, now I get to go talk to someone else? Or did it still feel like, all right, I got to talk about love. I just got to figure out what everyone else is loving?
Yeah. A little bit of both, right? Because when I got to see new people, we were really discouraged to talk to each other, like not talk to each other off camera. It happened a few times, but they want everything on camera so they can get it right. So that was refreshing to see new faces other than be with your partner constantly for weeks. But then again, it's like, oh shit, like, I want to talk to you about like, I don't know, the latest stuff on TV, like not just love and marriage and get the chisme on your relationship. Be not forced, but be soft manipulated to gossip about it later, and I'm like, man, like that's not me. It's just not me, like.
Oh.
So are you at all surprised by the fans' reaction to your friend, Natasha?
Very, very. We were both surprised. We had no idea. I was like, when I watched her, actually like watched it back, the show in January, I was like, Natasha, you made the cut, like actually made both scenes. Like, that's really cool. I was like, yeah. And then, we were both expecting like, I don't know, maybe 100 or so people to hit her up, like people from high school and this and that and that. I mean, the world, again, that was a shocker. The world like blew up. Because I've known her to always be a blunt person. I'm a blunt person with her. And we just kind of have this like East Coast kind of vibe with each other. But that's how we've always been. But like, I think because she got some great context in there because she was also married and divorced. And she kind of saw it for what it was. And I'm pretty sure that if I were in her position looking in, I would have done the same thing. But again, when you're a soldier for the wrong person, you'll give that person the benefit of the doubt all the time. So if anything, I was like a little bit more defensive about it. Like, what do you mean? Your opinion really like isn't affecting me right now because, just because oh yeah, you never saw this, but I remember at the table, we were kind of going back and forth a little bit because I was like, just because you had married and got divorced and didn't work out, that doesn't mean that you need to kind of like project that onto me and assume it's going to happen in my case too, So that's the way I saw it then, but obviously different. But yeah, very surprised. We were both very surprised.
Yeah.
It's always really refreshing to have someone who's outside of the show watching it, like it's like a viewer watching it and then being able to speak their mind on the show. So I think a lot of the viewers were like, yes, Natasha.
Yeah. Everyone's been like jumping the gun and like, why are you even here on the Ultimatum to begin with? And why are we asking the obvious questions? I mean, like to us during the experience, things were very obvious, but I think the way they just pieced it all together, it just left a whole bunch of speculation as to like, why are these people even doing it anyway? Because it leaves that suspense, and yeah, like Natasha just came in completely like, what's up? Why are you here? Where's Mildred? Why aren't y'all holding hands? Like, you haven't slept together? Like, how do you know if you don't like it until you do? So like there's just all these like kind of obvious things. But that made like almost like a comedy relief bluntness to like a lot of viewers. I could see that. Yeah.
Did you have anyone else from your personal life who was like considered to be on the show besides Natasha, or was it just her?
So we both had each cast member had 2 guests that they could bring in and film. And they were all a month apart. So like, we would bring 1 week, and then like a month later, they flew in the same pair. So like Natasha made both of those cuts, but my other friend didn't because I had a friend that came in and flew in and did 2 different times. And
oh wow.
Yeah. And then they're from DC, right? So they're flying across the country, they're getting hotels, they're getting this and that, and they had to fly 2 different times.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh
So like a lot of
man.
it just didn't make it a lot of like family members. You know, I think for Mildred, you didn't see anyone, you know, so
Mhm.
it depends on where the storyline wants to go.
Gotcha. So the show comes out, you know, it's a year and a half or so after you actually had the experience. So what's next for you?
That's a lot. Like, I mean, honestly, for maybe the last 2 weeks, I would say I've been able to sit down, see the opportunities in front of me, see all those things. I mean, you never really know until it happens. And then, you know, like it's busted wide open. You know, for the first 3-4 weeks, I was holding on to the rails like all of y'all were, but just in a different way. I'm like, hold on, like, let's go. You know, I'm like, what the fuck is my life right now? You know, and it's so hard to concentrate. You don't get sleep, you don't get anything. I've been warned about this. You don't get sleep, you don't everything. You're having like social media FOMO. Every freaking 10 minutes there's another news article out about you, about something stupid, like about, and it's just like you're kind of forced to be in a position to think for yourself, and that's a very healthy thing, because if you don't, you will crumble, and
Mm.
you know, you kind of, you know. So but with that being said, the last 2 weeks I have finally been able to like maneuver, and you know, and I think there's the demographics of my fan base, if you want to call it that, is very, you know, like kind of like 2 or 3 big things, right? And whatever I do, I just want to make sure that it's authentic to me. And I know my mission, whatever that looks like, whatever brand, or, you know, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I think anyone would step a little bit into social media influencing, you know, like with that, I think you'll be kind of off the, you know, the rockers not to. Um, but I just want to make sure it's authentic. But my mission more so is because we are real queer representation in the media. We're not a character. We're not fictional characters. The fact that we're real people, when the cameras go down, we continue to be real people. And a lot of it is with our intimate lives are being put on the line. Um, there's a lot of opportunities with that. And that is also an opportunity to be your authentic self. And so my mission is to make sure that I show people that, or let people know that it's okay and it's safe, and it's okay to be your authentic self. And you want to do it so much, and where I can help other people feel safe to do the same, whatever that looks like, whether it's funny, whether it's not funny, like whatever it is. I just need to be me and continue to be myself, and create whatever that means. And I know that's my mission, right? But I don't exactly know where that's going to land. So.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I love that. I mean, like, honestly, like, I'll like, just like the show coming out and you being on TV, and like the whole cast being on TV, and like during Pride and everything, like, just like anecdotally, I know it meant a lot to like my friends who are like mostly like out queer people. Like, it was so impactful for us. And I'm just like, really, like, the people at home watching that, like, wherever there's queer people at all stages of their journey watching that. There's people of all identities watching that, like, and getting to see more people.
Yeah, and they feel
Yeah, and it's
seen.
amazing.
They finally
Yeah.
feel seen when it comes to like who they are and who they love, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that that's just like we all knew coming into the project it was already going to be big, because it was just the same producers as Love is Blind, you know, and it's Netflix. So,
Mhm.
you know, I don't think it was going to be like some mini docuseries. So we knew it was going to be big, but coming into it, we already knew it was going to be way bigger than ourselves. So that was an opportunity in itself to be like a part of something. And it's not, the goal is not to be perfect, right? It's just to be real. And, you know, like, because we also make mistakes just like everybody else does. We also cry, we laugh, we, you know, make a fool of ourselves just like everyone else. And people are like, this is horrible queer representation. I'm like, you're trying to act like you haven't like yelled at your partner once in like 5 years, that you haven't like thought about cheating on somebody, or like I mean, just the realness of it. It's not angelic, but it's what's really us, you know. And
Mhm.
that's the way that I feel like is such a huge vital role in help bridging the gap in between, normalizing it, not making us superior to anyone else, and you know, but just normalizing it. Like, I'm just glad I got to be a part of that.
Hell
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you
Hell
so
yeah.
much for being a part of it and being open enough to put yourself in front of the world like that. So, with this mission, where can people follow you and keep up with you and order cameos from you?
Cameos, yeah. So, the cameos are wild. So both social medias, TikTok and Instagram, I'm on tiff.ddr, so tiff.dir. And yeah, you can follow me there. It's a hot queer summer all summer long. We're doing worldwide lesbian tours, like doing all the pride events and stuff. So, I just got back from like Denver Pride, LA Pride, going out to Austin Pride to do stuff. And so they just got me going like all summer long for that stuff. But when I settle down, I'm thinking about getting into like more projects, and just seeing where that takes me. But yeah, to keep up, go on tiff.ddr.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiff. We
You're
really
very
appreciate
welcome.
this.
So awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary, where can people find you?
You can follow me everywhere at Frail Mary and check out what I'm doing. I'll be gone next weekend at my game. So can I play fake Survivor as well as Evie played real Survivor? Probably not. We'll see.
Love it.
And Dr. Evie Jagoda, where can people find you?
I'm on everything at Evie Jagoda. And if you haven't checked out our Pride Has Spoken Queer Survivor series that came out, we finished the series at the end of June. We had our last interview with Todd Herzog. You can check out our interviews with Todd, Missy, Hi, and Carla this season. It was a really great season with my co-hosts, Matt and Grace. So if you haven't gotten your fill of queer reality TV content, go check that out.
It really was an amazing season. Yeah, y'all killed it. And yeah, everybody, you can find me on all social media at Asia like Asia. That's AYSHA like ASIA. So thank you so much. We're so glad to have you here, Tiff, and hope everyone goes and sends you a follow.
Yes, same for you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it for our postseason coverage of the Ultimatum Queer Love. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, Tiff.
Yeah, my pleasure.